And now it's my privilege to introduce the Very Reverend Miguelina Howell, who serves as the 10th Dean of Christ Cathedral in Hartford, Connecticut, and was vicar of the cathedral. Miguelina also serves as chaplain to the House of Bishops, faculty for Credo, a wellness program of the Church Pension Group, and serves as member of the Church Pension Group Clients Council. She served as the 7th and first female rector of the Church of the Epiphany, Diocese of Newark. Miguelina is originally from the Dominican Republic, where she holds a license in clinical psychology. She earned a theological degree from the Centro de Estudios Teológicos and was ordained a priest in 2003. She served as a member of the Episcopal Church Latino Hispanic Ministries Missioners Council of the Advice. Miguelina served as member of the Task Force for Reimagining the Episcopal Church. She served in the Episcopal Diocese of the Dominican Republic as priest in charge of 3 congregations, executive director and administrator of the Diocesan Camp and Conference Center, and coordinator of young adult ministries. Miguelina has also served as a member of the presiding bishop's staff, as a member of the Council of Advice of the President of the House of Deputies, and as a member of Executive Council of the Episcopal Church. A pastor at heart, Miguelina is committed to leadership development and collective ministry. She is passionate about social and racial justice, as well as the intersection of spirituality and the arts. Miguelina is married to Daniel M. Howell. Miguelina and Daniel are the parents of 3 intelligent, handsome, and loving boys, Dominic, Darius, and Dorian. Please join me in welcoming Dean Howell to the forum.
Thank you very much, Stacy, for this lovely introduction. And thank you to Dean Penny for the invitation to join you today. I bring you greetings from our cathedral community in Hartford and from the Reverend Jillian Barr, who is a member of our cathedral chapter and one of your own. Before we dive into a journey to explore the redevelopment process of Christ Church Cathedral in Hartford, please indulge me and allow me to share with you our context, our historical context, the bigger picture of who we are as a cathedral community. After I share an introduction of who we are, I will speak of the process in which we engage for the discernment process for the redevelopment. And then I'll share with you some pictures and the design that we selected and the reasons behind it. Throughout the presentation of the design, I invite you to interject and ask any questions that you may have. And let's make this an interactive tour of Christ Church Cathedral redevelopment. As many of you know, in the first years of our religious life as the Church of the Colony, St. Paul's Cathedral in London was our cathedral and ordinations took place there. After the revolution, when the church became a national church and the domestic cathedral movement emerged, dioceses either decided to build buildings for the specific purpose of serving as cathedral, like St. John the Divine, or what we know as the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C., or dioceses chose a different route. And that would be to identify the largest, the wealthier, and the closest to government, geographically located closest to government, to invite them, those parishes, to consider serving as the cathedral for the diocese. And that was the case for us in Hartford, Connecticut. Christ Church Parish was founded in 1762. Our building was erected and consecrated in 1828 and set apart as the cathedral of the Episcopal Church in Connecticut in 1919. Even after being designated as the cathedral, Christ Church functioned for many years as a cardinal parish. Today, the cathedral serves as a resource for apostleship as we participate in God's mission of restoration and reconciliation in the city of Hartford, the Episcopal Church in Connecticut, and in the world. And it's a constant evolving of that identity as a cathedral. In terms of governance, we have a chapter which has fiduciary oversight, and a cathedral congregations committee, which is responsible for programmatic oversight. Members of our cathedral congregation committee are members of chapter, and members of chapter are elected at diocesan convention. Let's talk about the discernment process that led to the redevelopment and a renewed sense of cathedral identity. In 2014, Bishop Ian Douglas appointed a discernment task force to explore our identity and vocation as a cathedral. He posed 3 questions. 1, what is a cathedral in the 21st century? 2, does the Episcopal Church in Connecticut needs or wants a cathedral? And if so, number 3, is Christ Church and the diocese willing and ready to fully embrace the role of a cathedral? And this discernment process had 2 layers. A diocesan-wide layer that was led by Harlan Dalton, who then was priest in charge and chair of the task force, and then a congregational inward discernment process that was led by me in partnership with the chair of the congregations committee and other lay leaders. The questions I mentioned above that were presented by Bishop Ian were core elements of the conversations and the listening sessions hosted across the diocese and within the cathedral community. This discernment process lasted 12 to 14 months. Both the task force and the congregations committee presented its finding to chapter. There was a deep listening and an intentional space to invite people to speak their minds and to share their passion, their concerns, their hopes, their expectations, and their fears. In 2015, the task force presented a report to chapter with 18 recommendations. And the report invited the Episcopal Church in Connecticut and the cathedral to embrace the cathedral, Christ Church Cathedral, as the cathedral, with the 18 recommendations as a way forward. One of these recommendations was that the cathedral should have flexible space to expand our participation in God's mission in the neighborhood. And the cathedral chapter approved the report, and the report was presented to the annual convention in October 2015. And Christ Church Cathedral was reaffirmed as the cathedral of the diocese. In 2016, which was the year that I was nominated by Bishop Ian and appointed by chapter to serve as dean, I was vicar for 2.5 years prior to that. In 2016, we proceeded to explore and implement all areas that were noted in the 18 recommendations. I have found those 18 recommendations as the pillar, the foundation of the vision of our cathedral for the next 10 years at least. One of those recommendations was a very sensitive one, flexible space. Duo Dickinson, an outstanding architect in Connecticut and member of a parish in the diocese, was engaged and provided his services pro bono. Duo, working with Bishop Douglas and with me, designed a nude space. In the process of the design, we engaged members of our cathedral congregation to provide feedback. We convened civic, religious, educational, and art leaders from the greater Hartford area to provide feedback about the design and to invite them to articulate what specific elements should be considered as we offer this flexible space to the community. And it was in this particular area where we were very intentional in focusing our flexible space as a catalyst for mission. For instance, one of our community partners, Hartford Stage, the theater, was part of the conversations in the process of us discerning and deciding what type of lighting shall we use, because they will be beneficiary of our space as we partner in different initiatives together. And they had the expertise and the need to have lights that were feasible for the work that we are doing together. In June, Hartford Stage will perform a monologue in our space, and we will be using our intelligent lights. It was important to have community leaders from different sectors to come to us and share with us what their hopes and dreams were for this space. because the cathedral is not just our cathedral, it's the cathedral of the city of Hartford. It's the cathedral of the Episcopal Church in Connecticut. It's a space where we all come together to work for the welfare of our city. The total cost of our project was $2 million. The cathedral chapter invested an initial $500,000, and a capital campaign was developed and implemented across the diocese to support our cathedral project. And you are familiar with capital campaigns and fundraising initiative. Is an arduous job, and there was significant commitment from across our diocese to support this collective vision. On March 1st of 2020, construction started. And on September 28th of 2020, we finalized the project. We completed the project on time and on budget. And during that time, we were in the midst of the pandemic shutdown. So our cathedral congregation did not feel the displacement of the physical space, as we all had to be displaced, unfortunately, due to the pandemic, and worship in an online platform. That was one of the very few silver lining of this time of pandemic and shutdown. It allowed us to journey together as a community in a platform that did not have all the elements of transition as it would have been if we were worshiping in our Cathedral House auditorium. On October 31st of 2020, we blessed the redeveloped space, and in March of 2022, we hosted an open house for our diocese companions to explore and experience their renovated cathedral. In February of 2022, we offer a community breakfast where leaders that participated in the conversation prior to the implementation of the redeveloped space came and experienced the cathedral and shared their impressions of this space. And we hosted such breakfast with our partners from Hartford Stage. After the completion of the project, we have consistently created spaces for lay leaders of our cathedral congregations to share their concerns, their excitements, and their sadness. Not everyone is elated about the new space, and those who are nostalgic of our pews and the way things used to be have had a space to share their feelings and have done so in love. I like to share a story of one of our cathedral leaders who is very traditional and loved the pews and loved the way things were. A mature leader and a person of deep compassion engaged with me in conversation about the sadness of the loss of the pews and the loss of the space as we knew it. And yet said, I know, Lina, I know that we are the church that is called to look into the future. And if we do not change our space, our culture won't change. And I recognize that as much as I miss the pews, I actually like the floor. I actually like the new floor. I like this, and started sharing with me the different elements of the cathedral redevelopment that resonated with him. To me, that was a day of a significant gratitude in this process. Here's a person who struggled with the change and yet was open to see the new thing that God was doing among us. And we created spaces with our annual meeting. Members of the Cathedral Congregations Committee are available for people to share their concerns, to give feedback as we continue to implement. We have, and you will see when I share later, we are experiencing different settings for seating. And after each season, we create space for people to share with us how they experience that space and the configuration. So there are important takeaways for me as a dean and as a pastor who has journeyed with this congregation through a significant time of change, including a pandemic. We no longer do business as usual. Being faithful to the mission of God and to reclaiming our first call to meet God in God's people, not only the people who are inside our walls, but the people who are in our neighborhoods, is at the core of our calling. To embrace our baptismal covenant courageously and to listen to God's voice as well as to listen to the times. Church is not longer Sunday morning. God will have the church that God wants. And we are God's church, and we are called to be open to hear God's voice in these changing times. And I'm so appreciative that this was a thoughtful and collaborative process. Before I share pictures, I would like to invite you, if you have any questions about the process and about our experience, I would like to open, if it's okay, Stacy, to open the forum for questions at this time.
That's perfectly fine. Does anybody here in the Great Hall have any questions at home? You can either unmute yourself or type it in the chat. Actually, I have a question. I would like to know what your relationship was with the community that surrounded the cathedral before the change, and how is that after the change? Have you seen a difference?
Well, we have been very intentional in building bridges and creating partnerships with our the organizations that are surrounding the cathedral area and in the city of Hartford in general. So this has been an ongoing process since we reaffirmed our call to be a cathedral for the whole. So what I have seen is leaders from across the city and of organizations that we are partnering with have embraced us in deeper ways as we have shown our full and direct commitment to listen to their needs and be present for them. The cathedral now is part of an extension of their ministry and service. And that applies to Hartford Stage, and that applies to Capital Community College and to other groups. IQUILT organization, which is a partnership among different groups across the city that works towards a walkable and an urbanization process that helps Hartford to be a livable and attractive place for people. So I think that what the redevelopment has done, especially us creating a space to have them share their needs and incorporate their needs in this, has shown them that we are present and that we are partners, willing partners in this process of taking care of our city and the community, of course.
Thank you. Yes, Barbara.
I'd like to hear more about how the people who don't want to change, and then you get them to change. What are the factors that are involved in that?
Well, I don't think that we get them to change. I think that the space, and you will see it, has been so inviting and has shown already the benefits of this transformation that people have been open to try it on. And the love that they have for God and the love that they have for church allows them to put in perspective their personal feelings. I think that the openness that we have had and the true listening has been key in how people have experienced their feelings and their emotions in relation to the challenges in experiencing changes, and they have felt truly heard. And that doesn't change their feelings, but change how they approach the challenges that they experience with change.
Any other questions? Okay, there are none from the Great Hall and nobody on Zoom. So please go ahead with your PowerPoint.
Thank you. These are pictures that show how our cathedral used to look like. You may see that we had the pews with the pew ends, and these pews back in the days were purchased by families who could afford it. And in the balconies, people who looked like me were able to sit and be part of the balcony. Part of the change that for me reflects God's dream for all of us is that everyone can sit in the same place and worship God together, regardless of race, gender, or sexual orientation. And for me, part of that the transformation of taking the pews down is a social justice statement. But that's my personal experience. This is an overview of a worship service in the context of our old space. You can see the floor, which was changed to white oak, and I'll speak a little later about that, was tiles from the 60s. these screens right here divided the nave with the narthex. And in the transformation of the space, this area here became restrooms. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. There were borders here in the chancel with narrow steps in the front. And this is a picture that shows the demolishing of the wood, and most of the wood was repurposed and stay in the space. In the process, we found that we had asbestos, and that delayed a little bit the process, and we needed to address it, and that increased a little bit the cost. However, we stayed on budget and on time. These are the screens that you saw that divided the narthex with the nave, and one of them was used here. And this that you see here is a storage space in the nave, and this wood, the brown wood, is the pew ends, and these are new columns that have the white oak that is also in the floor. Here's a picture of us trying on and setting up the chairs. Members of our cathedral congregations, members of chapter, clergy of the diocese, and Bishop Ian and I met and had a day to just rejoice in this and work together, setting up the chairs. One of the changes that we made was to take down a large padded door and transition into a transparent glass door that allowed the city people walking outside to see what's happening indoors. This is an overview of the renovated space. I hope you can see how open now the chancel area is, where all the steps are from each end. The pulpit and the lectern are both movable, and they can be removed when we have presentations. Everything in the chancel now can be removed except the diocesan cathedral, the dean stall, and the canon stall. If you look at the dividing walls, and I call them connecting walls where the storage is, this little image here is our Stations of the Cross. And the way I introduce this session is, this is an imagery, an icon of where we are and how this journey has been. The pew ends represent the legacy of the past and how we honor our past as it informs our present, our future. The wood in the columns that is from the white oak that represent our state and also represents the future and the present, and the Station of the Cross icon, which is always God at the center of everything that we do. This is an overview from the balcony. Another thing that we were able to do with this renovation was to create a capability for live streaming and the intelligent lights, as I mentioned earlier. Behind these walls, there are the restrooms, which we did not have. We only had one accessible restroom in the back and two very small, narrow entrance restroom that has become now gender neutral individual restroom. And then we have men's restroom here and women's restroom in this side. This is a lateral view. This is where the new air conditioning, our cathedral for many years was hoping to have air conditioning system. You do not want to be here in a summer in Hartford. And we have air conditioning, and you see how the vents are so seamless. Duo Dickinson did a fabulous job merging the old with the new and being practical and seamless. A person who truly appreciates liturgy and sacred spaces help us in designing something that was fluid. This is a ramp that we designed and created to have access to the chancel. So everyone has now access to the Holy of Holy Places. This is another view of the ramp from the lateral entrance of our cathedral building.
Can I ask one question?
Absolutely.
Actually, it's from Dean Penny. She would like to know what the seating capacity was before and after the remodeling.
Seating capacity before the remodeling, including the balcony, was 716, and we reduced it by 200, and we are now 516. more chairs could be accommodated, but we purchased 300 chairs that for the first level. Thank you for asking.
One other question from Roxanne. How easy is it to move and rearrange and store the chairs?
The chairs are stackable, so technically they're easy to rearrange. It does requires a production, and we plan accordingly. It requires significant human power, and we're in the process now as we return somewhat to normal in these during pandemic times. Our activities are not as frequent as they are in pre-pandemic, but they are starting to pick up. And we have encountered some challenges in terms of human power, and we're working in creating more support from staff and others to do the arrangement. It takes time and it takes effort. The chairs are relatively heavy, and they're stackable. We have carts, and it's easy to rearrange. It just it's time consuming. Any other questions before we move forward?
No, you may move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a quote by Bishop Ian: joining Jesus, participating in God's mission. Our joining Jesus was the theme of our fundraising campaign, and the vision of joining Jesus in the neighborhood as we participate in God's mission. This is a view of the chairs stack. They stack by 5, and you can move them 5 at a time with carts. And we use New Holland furniture from Pennsylvania, and I highly recommend them. This is a view of the side panels. And as you notice, we kept them to, again, honor the past and to keep our space with a mixture of old and new. This was our seating arrangements configuration for Lent. We decided to do monastic style, choir style, with a pulpit here and a lectern here, and the congregation experienced this for the first time this Lent. Some people appreciated significantly to have the opportunity to see each other and be in a more intimate space, and others felt uncomfortable not to be able to directly look at the high altar. And we have engaged in conversation about how people experience that setting. So I'd like to show you, this is a picture of the empty space that was pre-shares. That's Bishop Ian and I looking at some drawings. And then this is concert style. And for concerts, we usually take the lectern and the pulpit out. This is also concert style with more chairs available and not hallway in the middle. This is in the round. And what you see here is an altar that belongs to the Episcopal Church in Connecticut. And we see it as a symbol of our unity. And it is stored at our cathedral. And it's used for diocesan conventions and diocesan services. And we have been using it when we are worshiping in the nave. We took one day to change all configurations and take pictures, and we shared those with the congregation well in advance the first season, and indicated which configuration we were using per season. And before each configuration happens, I have sent a notification to the congregation, reminding them of what's coming up and giving them a visual of the picture. I think that those are parts of the process that allow people who are not so comfortable with the change to be prepared to what to experience.
I have two.
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. So
No,
Dean Penny said that our chapel chairs are from New Holland, and she asks if the railings on the steps are removable in your cathedral.
The railing are not removable. The railings are not removable. Those are permanent feature. Only the lectern and the pulpit are.
Thank you.
You're welcome. This is a reception style setup, which we did 2 weeks ago as we hosted Dr. Christina Cleveland for a white supremacy lecture and conversation for 3 days. And we hosted 130 people in that configuration. This is one of our breakfasts with the community partners. We hosted regional confirmations. And I'd like to share with you this video that has both Bishop Ian and Duo Dinkinson explaining part of the redevelopment process and our design.
Welcome to our Christ Church Cathedral, newly renewed and newly redeveloped for the sake of the mission of God and our participation in it. We begin in the narthex, that space between the worshiping gathering space known as the nave and the outside world. In this redevelopment, it was vitally important for us to make the narthex, that in-between space, much more transparent and much more open one to another. We moved the handicap access, the fully accessible ramp, which was on the transept, into the center. In addition, you will notice that the front doors themselves are now fully glass, instead of being a barricade, keeping the outside from the inside. The narthex, newly designed, newly developed, newly renewed, becomes the space of invitation, where the church and the world meet. Welcome to this wonderful, flexible, transparent, renewed, and beautiful nave. We've made significant changes and upgrades to this space. Of course, you can notice the beautiful floor. Gone are the 1950s flagstone, which was filled with asbestos, as well as the linoleum in the pew boxes. Instead, we have this incredibly beautiful white oak floor, which is the state tree of Connecticut. Gone are the pew boxes, those boxes that were rented for people of means and difficult to access. As a cathedral, we have cathedral chairs. This whole space can be reconfigured. We could have church in the round. We could have church in choir style. Or all of these chairs can be removed, and this space could be used for open exhibits, or for gatherings, or for celebrations. The nave, it's the main gathering space, and now it is completely accessible for all people, for our worship, for the use of our neighbors. The chancel, like the nave, is completely flexible as well. The furnishings can all be removed in case this space would like to be used for an orchestra or for some other kind of performance. What you can't see particularly well, but is here and very important, is of course the air conditioning grates underneath the altar. This whole space, the chancel and the nave, now has air conditioning as part of our redevelopment exercise.
The connecting wall was designed to provide storage for our chairs and tables and equipment. As you have heard before, Bishop Douglas mentioned our partnerships with different organizations in the city of Hartford and beyond. Having a flexible space that also accommodates storage, it's a great utility. The connecting wall, to me, it's an iconic feature of our cathedral redevelopment project. The merging of the old and the new, with the old pew ends and the new wood forming the columns, is an image of the future. We are honoring our past as we look into the future with Jesus at the center. The baptismal font was originally located on top of a platform. With the redevelopment project, the platform was removed and the baptismal font is now directly connected to our new white oak floor. When our cathedral is used for non-religious purposes, our baptismal font remains standing as a symbol of our faith and a reminder of our commitment to follow Jesus into the neighborhood.
The architectural challenge in trying to take an 1837 consecrated in 1838 building and bring it into the 21st century is not only about the new stuff you're dealing with, but it's also reusing and rethinking and venerating the old stuff. In the new aspect of that, these steps that use the white oak both as a surface but also as a vertical plenum, you can see how the oak changes its grain, serves as a new basis for old objects that have been reused, the pulpit and the lectern, and those things sit on this wonderful overarching curve. And the code compliant railings that we made were done in a way that celebrate access versus apologize for it. In a lot of civic architecture, the ramp, the idea of helping those that don't have normal mobility feel like they can access a place, is only done functionally. At Christ Church Cathedral, we actually take the ramp and turn it into an architectural feature, not only of access from the nave to the chancel, but also featuring the wood that we use everywhere else. I also wanted to make something that invited the touch of humanity, creation, and participation in the architecture. So when you come to the cathedral and you use the ramp, take a look at the top of it, and you can actually see the wood splines set into the end grain of the white oak that really manifests the beauty of natural wood that God created for us to use.
The renovated cathedral space will be used in a versatile way, and the restrooms will accommodate the number of people and the capacity that we are now going to be embracing in this new way of being as a cathedral flexible space. We invested in the installation of theatrical lights, which are called intelligent lights. This lighting setup will enhance the capacity of our cathedral to host a diverse range of events, including theatrical performances. It will also give us an extraordinary opportunity to enhance our worship experiences, highlighting the beauty of light as part of God's creation. One of our cathedral vocations is to be a resource for all, a resource for the city of Hartford, for the 4 cathedral congregations, for the Episcopal Church in Connecticut, and beyond. This renovated space creates for us an opportunity to serve in a flexible and meaningful way. Remember that every member of a parish in the Episcopal Church in Connecticut is a member of our cathedral. Come and see.
That was amazing. We have a few more questions in the chat.
Wonderful.
Bill asks, is there a way to rake the chairs? In other words, to have various levels so people could see what's going on better?
Well, if we were to get, and this is a question, thank you, that has arisen before. If we were to have tracers, setting them up, protecting the floor, of course, it is possible. The space is large enough that any configuration can be possible if we have tracers to establish different levels.
Thank you. Thank
Which
you.
we don't have right now. You're welcome.
And Dean Penny's comment to people on Zoom can see it in the chat, but in the Great Hall, we can't see it. In case anyone is wondering about the many similarities between Christ Church's renovation and ours, Dean Lena and I worked entirely independently. Great work, Dean Lena.
I think that if we are being attentive to what God is telling us, if we are being attentive to the needs of the world, there will be a lot of synchronicity across the Episcopal Church and across cathedrals. If we are listening, if we're paying attention, we will encounter similarities because the needs are the same.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Any further questions from the Great Hall, or people at home on Zoom are free to unmute and to ask questions? There are none.
I just want to say how beautiful the cathedral is after post renovation. It's just you've done such beautiful work, Lina, and working with the diocese and with the bishop and with the architect to draw in all these elements. Just fabulous. I hope you feel joy leading worship in that space.
I do, and I have to say that is it looks like the screen is being shared.
We're having a little technical issue on our side.
But we can still see you.
I feel that the space is so inviting. It's lighter. It's lighter in terms of furniture, but it's also lighter in terms of the vibe that we experience as we worship. And I'll speak for myself. There's such an increase in joy to lead worship in a space that is in tune with who we are called to be. From a spiritual perspective, I have to say that one of the highlights for me this year has been that we offer a spiritual retreat in the context of Sunday worship. A Lenten retreat focused on the life and legacy of Julia of Norwich. And we did it in the nave. We did it with small groups right there, people sitting in quiet, people moving around our space. And in the past, that kind of events were happening in the cathedral house, but we were able to have a spiritual retreat in the context of our sanctuary. And for me, that was a highlight of the use of the space this year.
Dean Lena, if you could stop sharing your screen, then we will be able to see you better.
I actually stopped sharing my screen a while ago.
Okay, then
Yes,
we are
ma'am.
having technical issues. I apologize.
There's someone who's listed as cathedral host who's sharing the screen, who's
Yes.
sharing my PowerPoint. It's not me.
No, okay. Thank you. And I apologize. We're having some technical issues on our end. But please continue. Good.
Is there any other questions? Well, I'm not clear where you are in the process of redevelopment, but I'll say this: be open to the movement of the Spirit. Be open to try things on, because it is in trying on that we encounter each other and encounter God. And our spaces are not just the brick and mortar. They are an expression of our culture as communities, and they are an expression of who we are. And if our spaces reflect the hospitable spirit of Christian community, those who are in our neighborhoods will connect with us in ways that are meaningful and relevant as we continue to work together in God's mission. And thank you, Penny, for the invitation. And thank you all
One
for
other question.
this time.
Thank
Perfect.
you.
One other question, sorry. I love how you've lightened the space with the oak floors and the walls. But I'm wondering how the floors are holding up so far with all the traffic.
It's a good question. The floors are holding up very well. There was two or three tiny cracks, which we were expecting. We have the best architect in the whole entire world. I claim that, and I stick with that story. And Duo let us know that eventually, with the change of weather, we will experience some cracks that will need to be addressed. And effectively happened in March. And the vendors who took care of the floor came and addressed that issue. And we also purchased humidifiers that were integrated with our heating and cooling system, so that the wood will not continue to stretch and have the balance that it needed. But we did have that challenge. But in terms of how the wood has served us. There's no scratches. There's no, it's been a year and a half, I think, that we have been using the space, and it looks brand new. Evidently, we are being very mindful how we treat it, how we clean it, and long-term care is something to keep in mind.
Has all your outreach to congregants helped them become more in tune with the new layout and the new chairs and so forth? Has that helped?
Oh, absolutely. There's no question. The opening of space for people to express their concerns, and intentional spaces created for them to be part of the discernment conversation, be part of the feedback on the design, and also be part of the feedback on how they're experiencing the configuration of the different configuration of seating, have created that sense of wholeness and integration, and has been inviting to many who are feeling uncomfortable with the change. So I think that it has impacted positively how people experience the new space.
How has the audio-visual capacity been affected?
Well, we have been able to reach out to many through Facebook, YouTube, with our live streaming feature, which we did not have prior to the redevelopment. It was part of the design before COVID-19, and we were affirmed in the decision to live stream as we encountered the challenges of the pandemic. Our sound system has been expanded, and the lighting makes a huge difference. We have the ability to spotlight the gospel reading. We have the ability to spotlight the pulpit. We have the ability to spotlight the high altar. And it's just focus on each transition of the liturgy in a way that is seamless, but very intentional.
You mentioned, Dina, that you don't know at what stage we are at. We replaced the pews with chairs last summer. But I'm going to show you, we're in the painful stage of remodeling the chancel to be flexible and accessible. And if you can see that, that's what we have at the moment.
Oh, wow. Been there, done that.
Yeah, you see the altar. It's this is 3 weeks in, so we're going to be like this for most of the summer. But at the end of it, we'll have a ramp, we'll have a better floor, we'll have theatrical lighting, and everything will be flexible. So it's very exciting.
I'm excited for you, as we are now in a place where we are enjoying the fruits of this work. Yeah. This is wonderful. Thank you for sharing.
Well, thank you for your inspiration to us and showing us the finished product. It's lovely. I think Stacy's seeing if there are any other questions in the Great Hall.
Seeing as there are none, we want to thank you so very much, Dean Howell, for being with us. Your space is amazing. I would love to come and visit it, and I hope you will come and visit us.
I hope so, and you all are welcome to come. Let's get an expedition to Hartford and do something together.
Bring your boys to San Diego, to the zoo and Legoland and SeaWorld.
That would be wonderful. Well, thank you so much for the invitation, and thank you, Dean Penny, and thank you, Stacy, for your for making this possible and for allowing us to share our story, which we hope is an inspiration to others, and so beautifully resonating with your story and the process of engaging in transformation of our space that then leads to transformation that is deeper, and that invite us to be out in the neighborhood and invite our neighbors to see church as part of who they are too, even if they are secular. Have a wonderful rest of your Sunday, and thank you so much for this opportunity to share our story from the corner of Hartford.
Thank you, Dean Howell.